2 words. Okay, here we go. Everybody is going to get a shot at this. The one New York School poem or Week 7 poem that is on your mind. Jason's first, followed by Max.
I think in reading over everything, the poem that jumped out to me the most was poem or Khrushchev is coming on the right day, because I appreciated the insertion of the blueberry blintzes.
O'Hara and the blintzes. Very cool.
Yes.
Max, next with Lainey on deck.
I'll plug Ashbury's Just Walking Around from ModPo Plus. It's hard to just walk around sometimes. And so I think it's a really lovely sentiment that's expressed in that poem. Try walking around sometime, you know?
Yeah, and people look at you oddly. What is that guy doing? Doesn't he have something better to do? Yeah.
But people have things better and worse to do.
Yeah, mostly worse. And also there's a kind of social ostracism and shyness that Ashbury brings to that whole situation. It's very cool. Lainey Brown, followed by Kate.
I'm going to say Bernadette Mayer's Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Surprise, right?
That poem has had such influence on you.
It has. And I'll just say the word wildness. It's all about wildness.
It ends with the wild boy of Aviron. Yeah. Good choice. Kate, followed by Dave.
Well, I'm always thinking about some trees, and Meeting As Far This Morning from the World is agreeing with it, and the kind of recursive quality of it, and how it changes every time I encounter it.
Yes. And just a little foreshadowing, Lainey is going to lead us in a session on a particular approach to some trees. So I'm looking forward to talking about that. Yes. Yes. Meeting by chance as far this morning from the world as agreeing with it. You and I are what the trees try to tell us we are. Dave, followed by Lily.
Arbogast's 20. I love the way it is able to recreate that hypnagogic state where you're between lucidness and being asleep. And it just reminds me of that story about Thomas Edison, which is probably an urban myth, about how when he was tired, he would go to sleep in a chair with a ball bearing in his left hand. So when he would stay in that hypnagogic state, but then drift into actual sleep, the ball bearing would fall out of his hand into a metal bucket and wake him up. So he would be jarred from it and he'd try it again. So he would try to maintain that hypnagogic state that Arbogast recreates here, because that's where all this creativity comes from and these crazy associations that you get. So I really like all that.
Self-torture for the purpose of productivity and creativity. Very cool. Thank you, Dave. We are going to talk about 20 this afternoon. I'm sure of it. It's such a good poem. Lily, followed by Jake.
I'm going to echo Lainey and Invasion of the Body Snatchers, because it's such a perfect seasonal poem for right now. And, we're 2-ish weeks away from changing the clocks back.
Yes.
I'm not really looking forward to it. And it's been a while since we were working in person and changed the clocks back. I don't know. I'm curious.
Yes.
To see that. Speaking of sort of hypnagogic states, I guess we'll see where we end up.
Not to be bragging about all the friends in this box that I know, but I know Lily as well. And that poem has all the Lily things. It's got time, weather, season, change, and the domestic version or the inside version of all the wild things that are out there. It's the only thing it doesn't have is a garden, I think.
Seed pods.
Oh, they're seed pods.
Yeah.
Okay, it's even got... Lily is so right for that poem. Jake, followed by Gabby.
Yeah, the poem I was thinking about is Why I'm Not a Painter, Frank O'Hara poem. And the question came up in my office hours about poets. Like, when did it become acceptable for serious poets to be seriously funny? It's a funny poem.
It is a very funny poem. Gabby, followed by Kanar.
I want to say February by James Schuyler.
What a poem.
It's a great poem, and this is going to be a very grad school reason for liking it. But it's more honest than the other New York poems, I think, about how perceiving and talking about ordinariness requires good frame analysis.
the distance that he feels from his window to the window of the woman with the baby is presumably one high rise to another. Could even be across an avenue or across a side street. But it's a distance, and yet one doesn't feel distance at all. There's an amazing intimacy that he creates in this urban, this sort of apparently dehumanizing urban space. So, or again, the sea, which is green with some kind of rose color. The sea turns into what the UN looks like on a big evening. So it's just marvelous. And then, of course, there's that great thing at the end, the use of it's about this and it's about that. All right, Kanar, followed by Ali.
So I think I'll name USA versus Cuba, the Hanif Abdurraqib poem, which I just find really striking and beautiful. And it sits in an interesting way within kind of the other poems of this week. But I'm especially interested in those forms of kind of temporal inhabitants that we have in this poem, and how those maybe differ in certain ways from some of the other poets. And especially, how something like the experience of time can sort of have processes of racialization grafted on sort of artificially, and yet those can intersect with kind of lived experiences that also sort of are unfolding through time. And I think it's just a really, really fascinating poem. And I love how it moves just free of punctuation through this kind of dense set of moments and memories and sort of temporal references. So.
Great choice. The poem is after Frank O'Hara. After. In other words, it's partly dedicated to Frank O'Hara. It's following Frank O'Hara. It is translated from Frank O'Hara. But what would you say, and this is like, can you do it briefly? What is this poem? What is Hanif saying to Frank through this poem?
Yeah, I don't have an excellent answer. It's a super quick moment, but I think, for one thing, something pressing upon this poem is what is it to be Black in America and to be in the highway ultimately is a public space of sorts, and it's one in which vulnerabilities of various kinds can be very quickly manufactured. And so in that way, it's a space that's sort of ripe for reflections and thinking back to difficult moments in one's life, which, we very much get in this poem. And so, yeah, just kind of dealing with this surround of anti-Blackness in the United States, I think is maybe a big part of the just like, hey, Frank, this is maybe a core difference in my life in terms of the speaker of the poem.
Great. So response takes the I do this, I do that, cares about the way in which that mode does and does not represent Black life, but derives enough of it to make us here a useful, productive mode of writing. So it's what a great response does. Yes, Ali, favorite poem this week?
I love every single one of these poems people have mentioned. I'm just overwhelmed with love for all of these poems. But I'm going to go back to the one Jason shouted out at the beginning of this exercise, which is Poem by Frank O'Hara, just because I think the windiness kind of captures a kind of pervasive mode in this week and in the New York school.
Great. Thank you.